The word imperative we need to stop and think about for just 1 second. The root of imperative is imperial. My mental picture of imperative is the king has spoken and therefore we must do it. There's no turning back. In olden days, if you violated what the king had said, lop off your head. There's a military metaphor that would add a little bit to this as well, and that is burn your bridges behind you. I don't know if you've ever heard that one. Sometimes it's burn your ships behind you. The concept is we've already crossed the river, the enemy is in front of us, and it's absolutely imperative that we beat the enemy. Therefore, if we burn the bridges behind us, there is no retreat. And I don't mean to make a military metaphor, but I think it's very well understood that when top management says we must have an imperative to capitalize on knowledge and to do knowledge management, that means there can be no turning back. What that also means is, in the very first days of doing knowledge management, you may have some trials and errors. That doesn't mean you give up. That just means you get smarter about how to do it. If you have the imperative, you do not give up. You absolutely, positively must move forward. Now, part of building the imperative is to understand that other companies have done a great job at knowledge management already. And we'll spend just a few moments talking about some companies who you would recognize, Ford Motor Company and British Petroleum, and maybe 1 or 2 others, depending on our time, and just give you a sense for the types of things they're doing in knowledge management and the kind of benefit they're realizing from it. And then the last subject, and hopefully we'll be able to spend at least a few minutes on it, is personal KM. To me, that's an extremely important subject. It's not being covered too much in KM circles yet. It's just brand new. But I personally feel that cultural change is a very difficult thing to do. But one way to make knowledge management successful is to bring it right down to the level of the individual, and that's personal KM. So we'll spend just a few minutes defining that. And then finally, we'll wrap up with questions and answers and finish up the last 30 minutes. Our expectation is that this entire session will take 3 hours, and we're about, I guess, 15 minutes or so into it. Is that all? No. We're almost a half an hour into it. So I'm actually getting a little bit of an early start here on this 1 hour session, which means I'll have some extra time. Okay, on the next slide, I'm going to show you some really important aspects of learning. There are many training styles, and they're all appropriate for different situations. But above all else, a learner-focused approach trumps a training-focused approach. And on this slide, I'm going to differentiate training-focused versus learner-focused. And if you'll read down, I believe all of you have a hard copy. I'll just go through these pretty quickly. On the training-focused side, we have the instructor is an expert, more or less is a director of the operation, and sometimes we call it a sage on the stage. Somehow on the soft copy there, the sage on the stage got clicked over to the right. On the right-hand side, a learner-focused approach, the instructor is not so much an instructor as a facilitator and a coach. And he might be called, or she might be called, a guide on the side. In the training-focused approach, the learning objectives are well established and they're adhered to. But in the learner-focused approach, the learning objectives can be flexible. That means the trainer follows an agenda on the left-hand side, but the learners can influence the pace and timing on the right-hand side. So if I'm sitting in front of a class, and even though I have what I'd like to cover, it turns out the folks in the class have some other desires, then we should adapt to what the real needs are of the class. In the training-focused side, the trainer provides examples and ideas, whereas the learner-focused approach, you hope to elicit examples and ideas from the participants. The assumption on the trainer side is that learners are inexperienced and not knowledgeable, and I don't believe that's a true assumption. I think learners are experienced and they are very knowledgeable, and therefore they should be contributing to the learning that takes place in the classroom. On the trainer-focused side, the trainer makes more statements as opposed to asking questions.
Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Sorry,
yes,
this
sir.
is Srini from Chennai. I do apologize for interrupting you, but I just can't see the slides. I don't know if other people have the same problem. I can hear you very clearly. I can see your image very clearly. But the slides, and Mark and my colleague in Reliance World see the slides. I can just about make out training focused and learner focused, and then I've lost it.
We'll just get it. We'll get it fixed.
We can't also see the slides.
So sorry to have interrupted you. My apologies for interrupting you. Please carry on.
No, I appreciate your interruption, and that's part of us coming up with a successful meeting today, that we make sure that there's any little glitches like that. Please do, as well as laugh, please do interrupt, and let's make sure we have as good a presentation as we can have.
Douglas,
hopefully you have a hard time.
Douglas, just a moment. What we're going to do now is we're going to toggle between the slides and you, so the slides are large enough. And so if you go off the screen from your view, it doesn't mean that we can't hear you. So you continue, even if you keep seeing just the slides, you continue.
Very good. Understood.
Can you see the slides now?
I see you, Harriet.
Okay.
Now I can see the slides. The slides
that's much better.
Okay, the other thing I just want to tell everyone that some slides...
Yeah, much better now.
Full view.
Is it a full view? Full screen?
No. It's not a full view, but it's much better.
3/4 or so. It's a 2/3 view, but much better than before.
Okay, we might move it to full view at any point in time, but Douglas, you are still there. Just continue.
That is a better view.
Yeah?
I think, Darius, I think you will see that on a couple of slides that have much detail, you might want to go to full view to get the bigger size of the text. And on some of the others, you won't need to. But Darius, if he's controlling it, whoever's controlling it there, use your own discretion.
Yeah, I think we'll have to use discretion, but maybe some slides where there's a lot of text, we'll have to kind of,
Yes,
Get all these participants.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Speaker and full view.
Okay. Yeah, this is a particular slide that the advantage of full view would be. Now I'm seeing 2/3, but you're seeing full view on the slide now. So what I'm seeing is not necessarily what you're seeing. Is that correct, Harriet?
No, I'm
We
seeing
are
roughly
completely... Srini, what do you see?
Yeah, much better.
full screen.
Full screen.
Much better. Very good.
This
Now I
is
see full
perfect.
screen. So I also see full screen. Very good. So now I can yawn and everything else because you're not seeing me, right? Okay. The trainer is the primary resource for information and explains and demonstrates. Whereas on the learner-focused side, learners are the primary resource for information, and we can glean concepts from other learners in the class. And lectures and discussion are the primary method as opposed to activities. In this mode today, we're not going to have an opportunity for much activities or many exercises, but in the more lengthy sessions that we'll have with KM fundamentals and personal KM, it's very important to have exercises or activities. And the learner is passive and absorbing information, whereas the learner needs to be active participant in the workshop. And then I think almost finally, one final evaluation is used, whereas in the learner focus, the facilitator uses many evaluations throughout the entire training session. Well, that's a little introduction to a learner-focused learning. The traditional is training-focused. We're hoping to, with this technology, sustain what I try to do in the classroom, which is a learner-focused approach. Now let's get into some of the meat of this module. In this case, we're going to define, and you'll notice my nomenclature or my numbering scheme up in the top of the slide has it as 1.01, define knowledge in 4 eras, and it's in that module, it's 4.1, module introduction. There are, in our documented history, some 4 eras of knowledge. Now I want to be careful when I describe this. We're not saying that knowledge, you'll notice down the lower left-hand corner, and the text says the Greeks or the Greek philosophers were the start. I'm not saying that knowledge did not exist before the Greeks. Obviously, the Yellow River Valley in China and the Indus region, Indus Valley in India, had great civilizations long before the Greeks. They had considerable knowledge. The Egyptians had a civilization long before the Greeks. They built the pyramids. So obviously all of these early cultures had knowledge, but we don't know about their thought process with regard to the concept of knowledge. And that's what we're talking here, not knowledge, but the concept of knowledge.